Thank you, Chairwoman Maloney. I want to also thank you for holding this important hearing and for being such a strong champion for the LGBTQ plus community throughout your entire public life. I want to begin by reminding everyone here, especially my colleagues across the aisle, what this hearing is about. It's entitled The Rise of Anti-LGBTQ plus Extremism and Violence in the United States. And despite this hearing title, colleagues on both sides of the aisle have obviously condemned the attack at Club Q and violence more broadly at today's hearing. It's also telling that the Republicans on this committee, with one exception, have not asked any questions about anti-LGBTQI plus extremism and violence. Instead, they've only wanted to talk about crime broadly or hate crimes against other communities. I'm disappointed, yet not surprised, that a few weeks after a killer murdered 5 people at an LGBTQI plus nightclub, the Republicans on this committee could not bring themselves to discuss anti-LGBTQI plus violence and its causes with our witnesses. Our community is scared, terrified that we'll be attacked going to the doctor, scared that we'll be attacked going to nightclubs, scared that we'll be attacked simply for living as our authentic selves. And unfortunately, this fear is well grounded. The attack at Club Q is only the latest high-profile example of violence against our community. In 2021, 20% of all reported hate crimes were motivated by hate based on sexual orientation or gender identity. Let me repeat that. Despite the fact that LGBTQ plus people make up roughly 7% of the population, 20%, or more than 1 in 5 reported hate crimes last year were motivated by sexual orientation or gender identity bias. My colleagues want to talk about anything but this anti-LGBTQI violence and their rhetoric that is contributing to it. This violence is impacting both LGBTQI plus people and our families. I ask unanimous consent to enter into the record statements from the Equality Caucus Transgender Equality Task Force co-chairs, Representative Jayapal, Wexton, and Newman, about the fear that they and their families are experiencing in the wake of anti-trans rhetoric and violence.
Without objection.
No one should have to fear violence because of who they are or who their family members are, but this violence is not happening in a vacuum. Politicians at all levels of government are targeting our communities, spreading misinformation, and looking to restrict our rights. Republicans are happy to discuss our community when they're attacking our rights, when they're crying on the House floor because they oppose marriage equality, when they're releasing statements attacking our community in press releases as they introduce new bills targeting our community. But when it comes to actually discussing the violence against our community and its causes, just a quick condemnation of what happened at Club Q and violence broadly and nothing more. In my view, this is shameful. And so I want to begin, Ms. Robinson, again, to thank all of the witnesses for being here today. Ms. Robinson, as we near the end of this hearing, is there anything that we've not covered yet relating to anti-LGBTQ plus extremism and violence that you would like to share for the record?
We can do something about this. We can ensure that social media companies uphold their community standards. We can pass the Equality Act to ensure that LGBTQ plus people actually don't have legalized discrimination happening to them in more than half of the states. We can, as a community, step up and say that we wholeheartedly, no matter what our party affiliation is, repudiate and rebuke these horrendous attacks on our people. There is work to be done, and especially on this 10-year mark of Sandy Hook, we can do something to end this epidemic of gun violence. We have to and we must.
Thank you. And Mr. Wolf, thank you so much for being here and for sharing your story. What message do you have to politicians who are championing bills to limit the rights of the LGBTQI plus community?
Thank you. I'm grateful to be here. And my message is simple: words have consequences. Somebody has to pay the price for unmitigated, unbridled hatred, the kind of hatred we've seen on the rise across this country. We've heard a lot about accountability in this hearing, and I'm glad we're talking about accountability. No one is asking for anyone but the shooter at Club Q to be on trial in Colorado Springs. But what we are saying is that people should be accountable for the things that come out of their mouths. And when you're willing to traffic in cheap shots and bigotry against a marginalized community that's already seeing hate against it on the rise, it's already seeing violence rising across the country, when you're willing to traffic in those things to score political points, you have to be accountable for what happens next. You have to hold yourself accountable for the impacts of your words. Words really do have consequences. Unfortunately, communities like mine have felt them. We have to do better than we are today.
Thank you. And I want to thank you, Madam Chair, for allowing me to wave on to the committee for this hearing. And I think to Mr. Wolf's point, we not only have to condemn these statements and this rhetoric, but we sadly have members of the Congress of the United States that are engaging in the use of some of this very inflammatory rhetoric against the LGBTQI community, and it needs to stop now.